Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the EDCO Evolve On conference. I'd now like to begin our next session of the day, the Bright Ideas competition. I'm Jason Diaz, chair of this year's competition, and I'll be moderating this session. Bright Ideas is an annual competition for economic development practitioners of all experience levels. It is designed to give economic developers the opportunity to develop a modern response to today's challenges, collaborate with fellow practitioners, refine their ideas, and expand their network. Last year at our inaugural competition, our fellow colleagues researched and curated resources on questions such as, how do I know if my municipality is a good candidate for the cannabis industry? How can I leverage new innovative solutions in a risk-averse municipal sector? And how can I assist in modernizing small town retail through online tools? I'm sure the last one, several of us were scrambling for solutions as our small businesses adapted to curbside pickup and opened up their very first virtual shopping cart. This year, our three finalists come to us today with a set of new research and resources that you will be able to access immediately after this session. This year's competition challenged our competitors to find solutions to some of our most requested problems, including those associated with COVID and understanding some of the challenges with the pandemic. These include items like, what goes into making an entrepreneurial ecosystem? How can I support my entrepreneurs? What are some of those key ingredients to fostering entrepreneurship in my community? And what should be my role within that ecosystem? Emmanuel Ray and Chadas Onan will grace us with their findings on Ontario's entrepreneurial ecosystem and how you fit in. Lucas Chan, Farine Stanio Navarra, and Ellie Levin will take us through their findings as it relates to what communities have been doing to successfully retain or attract youth. What kind of programs have been developed? What federal or provincial programs can be used to support that initiative? And lastly, Aliyah Abbas, Amanda St. John, and Brandon Webb will introduce their ideation of a revamped modern performance measurement solution, featuring what new metrics economic developers should be considering. What tools can they use to measure impact, and what can be considered best practice in measuring the effectiveness of economic development. Like you, each of these teams have spent the majority of 2020 balancing work from home schedules, Zoom meetings, and finishing certifications. And I'd like to personally recognize the time each finalist has provided into making this competition a success. On behalf of EDCO and its members, your dedication to improving our resource bank and assisting us in growing professionally is forever indebted, and we thank you. The Bright Ideas competition will carry on next year. We will have a third version where we're going to be connecting with the membership base to understand what kind of problems our new competition will face. In the time being, we will continue to promote some of the resources that have emerged from the initial competition and the secondary competition, this one here, that we'll be listening to today. And with that, I'd like to actually bring up the first finalist presentation. And I'd like to remind folks in the audience that you are part of the adjudication process. And at the end of this session, you will be voting on your favorite finalist and will support their case to being crowned the winner, which will be revealed at a later time. Without further ado, our first finalist, Emmanuel Ray and Chadas Onan, Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Submission. Cindy, if you could load up the presentation.
Hello, EDCO members. Welcome to our presentation at Evolve ON 2021. Today, we're pleased to present our report, Exploring Ontario's Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, Innovating for Future Growth. Before we get started, my research colleague Chadas and I would like to introduce ourselves and the organizations we work with. My name is Emmanuel Ray. I'm a member of EDCO and an economic developer with Société Économique de l'Ontario, supporting an economic reactivation project across Southern Ontario. I'll speak about that just a little bit later. SEO, a not-for-profit established in 2001, is headquartered in Ottawa and has offices in Toronto and Sudbury. With a provincial network of 30 bilingual employees across Ontario, We foster Ontario and Canada's economic prosperity by creating partnerships, collaborations, and alliances with all sectors. Delivering major federal programs, we collaborate with the province, municipalities, businesses, and other organizations to lead impactful economic development projects. We are a key member of REDE Canada, which brings together 12 provincial and territorial organizations from across Canada to support economic development for Francophone and Acadian communities. SEO has 4 pillars of expertise. Firstly, economic development, such as our economic reactivation project, a response to COVID-19, Route Champlain, a tourism initiative, and Elan F, an incubator for newcomers in Hamilton. We're also in the process of developing another incubator in Toronto. Several of these are featured in our report. Secondly, entrepreneurship. Currently, we work with over 150 entrepreneurs, including women, youth, and immigrants across the province, from Thunder Bay to Windsor, Sarnia to Hawkesbury. SEO helps entrepreneurs with job creation, growth, and succession planning. Thirdly, employability. SEO is the leader in promoting employability for Francophones and our bilingual people across the province. Our professional staff can help newcomers, job seekers, but also employers seeking to recruit Francophone and bilingual talent. Lastly, but not least importantly, of course, is immigration. SEO has participated with Destination Canada for over 10 years and other organizations to attract Francophone talent to Ontario and to ensure their successful integration and contribution to Ontario businesses. Our partnerships with the provincial and federal governments directly support Francophone immigration. Chadish, on to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Chadish Onan. I am working as project manager at Whaling Capital, responsible for local and international startup relations, partnership with Canadian startup ecosystem players. I'm also responsible for the creation of the upcoming incubation program. Whaling Capital focuses on early stage investment and investment advisory services. We invest in entrepreneurs from a diverse range of backgrounds who will drive the next wave of innovation in North America, starting from Canada. For 2021, we aim to build more and more Canadian businesses. On to you, Emmanuel.
Oh, thank you, Josh. Okay, folks, well, thanks again for joining us today. We're pleased to present a brief synopsis of our report, Innovating for Future Growth. The full 30-page report presents insight depth, including responses to EDCO's 4 key questions, our 5-phased approach, including a review, best practices, primary research findings, recommendations, and implementation. We also outline how EDCO can help, and finally, a conclusion for recommendations for future research. Our time is limited today, so let's get started. By the way, don't forget to put your questions into the chat. We can respond this morning or at any time later on. To begin with, our report responds to 4 key questions proposed by EDCO back originally in February-March 2020. We go into in-depth research to hear how international and local experts would respond. We read and read and read. After reviewing more than 40 articles, we present several case studies for each of these 4 questions. We outline our findings, gap analysis, and recommendations based on 27 interviews, 19 survey responses, with these 4 questions in mind. Chadish, on to you.
Through our 5-phase approach, we delve into entrepreneurial ecosystems at provincial, national, and global levels to dive deeper. International economic cooperation and regional partnerships have existed for centuries. OECD is recognized as a global connector and works with 37 countries. As Sir Richard Branson says, joining together and starting a conversation is really important. Therefore, primary ingredients for an entrepreneurial ecosystem are collaboration and change within existing networks. Many trade agreements have historically arisen from a disparity between nations. However, many more have solidified trading agreements where partnering countries understand the importance of collaboration as a means of advancing economic and social prosperity. Daniel Eisenberg of Babson College developed a foremost growth-oriented model called the domains of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, identifying 6 domains. These domains were policy, finance, markets, human capital, support, and culture. These six domains then were distilled into 3 key elements to form entrepreneurial ecosystems. The traditional method is focused on specific interventions to generate more entrepreneurs and more new ventures, whereas the growth-oriented model seeks to connect networks or clusters to enable better system function. Emmanuel, on to you.
Great. So innovation isn't always homegrown, nor are industry and economic development organizations typically successful at working independently. Yet most of you likely already know this, nor is it rocket science. But through our first phase, 3 critical success factors shone through. Firstly, collaboration and partnerships. Secondly, a coordinated approach. And thirdly, support for diverse entrepreneurs. Let's move on to phase 2. In phase 2, we present 9 case studies and present best practices that mirror growth-oriented policy iterated by these 3 key elements and the 3 critical success factors. The first case study, an example of SEO, Economic Reactivation Program, which is funded by FedDev and offers Francophone businesses, not-for-profits, and cooperative 3 phases of support to aid in the recovery from COVID-19. Offered to Francophone businesses across Southern Ontario, this program to date has supported over 150 entrepreneurs and organizations. Next month, the program will also be helping more startup businesses. The project's widespread impact is based on strong and effective partnerships. Chattis?
The second critical factor is coordinated approach. As announced in October 2020, the youth unemployment rate in Ontario was the 2nd highest in the country. Canada's youth are facing challenges which have been amplified during the pandemic. They're also key to our future success. Over its 20-year history, Futurepreneur has helped launch over 11,000 businesses, with on average each business creating 5 jobs. Another factor is supporting diverse entrepreneurs. Launched in 2020, the Black Opportunity Fund is a dynamic partnership between businesses, philanthropists, and foundations, aiming to build a $1.5 billion fund to permanently support community-based organizations and fill funding gaps for over 8,000 Black businesses. The fund is poised to support a national ecosystem of partners working towards transformational change. Emmanuel, on to you.
Great, thanks, Chattis. Phase 3 is rooted on our 2 initial phases. Through a literature review and 40 plus articles, 9 case studies, 27 interviews, 19 survey responses from across the province, we presented our research and findings and undertook a gap analysis. Now, as we have limited time today, we can't present all of our findings, but I can tell you this. Surveys contrasted top priorities during post-COVID and regional differences, while interviews identified gaps centered on 15 common themes and 3 critical success factors. As expected, surveys identified during COVID that BRE and other business and entrepreneurial supports were top of mind. Respondents commented that it was difficult to select only top 5, as most other categories also resonated as priorities. The post-COVID priorities shifted as expected towards workforce development. Notably, in terms of regional differences, all communities have identified that partnerships and collaboration currently exist or are being planned. Business attraction is also a strong priority. Whereas Francophone support, innovation hubs, business incubators are often missing or under development. Entrepreneur support for investors, newcomers, and investor networks were less often in existence. Notably, in terms of regional differences, good news is that all communities have identified partnerships and collaborations, either currently exist or are being planned. Business attraction is a strong priority. However, again, Francophone innovation hubs, business incubators are often missing. Also very concerning is that entrepreneur support for newcomers and investor networks are less often in existence or being planned. Given the critical success factors identified and national provincial policy towards innovation and growth, this needs to come to the forefront. What is also very in phase 4, our report highlights the next steps in local development and regional economic development can take to grow their networks and augment impact. 2 short-term recommendations and 8 long-term recommendations. The first step needs to be taking a partnership-based approach at the regional level. Our final phase proposes how EDCO can foster and encourage growth and innovation through 3 critical success factors. Firstly, by identifying, engaging, support sector-based and regional network partners. Chattis?
Collaboration, partnerships, and support for diverse entrepreneurs should be led through a regional approach with key stakeholders in economic development and needs to engage all levels of government. Therefore, EDCO can take an important role in this space. Emmanuel, on to you.
Great. Thank you. And thirdly, by supporting diverse entrepreneurs and establishing interprovincial and international MOUs to support diversity, inclusion, community building, and immigration across regional networks. In conclusion, we need to augment the collaboration across the ecosystem. The EDCO Bright Ideas Committee could not have predicted how the year would develop, nor how timely and important the research into Ontario's entrepreneurial ecosystem is. Ontario, as the cultural and economic center of Canada, is uniquely positioned to implement the recommendations and strategies proposed. EDCO has demonstrated leadership in this space by strengthening connections, deepening relationships, and building new partnerships. We recommend, as the next phase of research, that directly input is sought from entrepreneurs and the business community. We're pleased again to have present this report and the findings within to help local and regional economic developers innovate their networks for future growth across Ontario.
Please get in touch should you have any questions once the report is released.
From both of us, thank you. Jason,
thank you.
On to you for the Q&A.
Thank you for that. Pardon as I try to get my video to start here. But we will now open it up for questions for the attendees. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send your questions, and I'll do my best to ask your questions. At the same time, if we do run out of time during our little Q&A, both Emmanuel and Chattis could answer along in the Q&A section themselves. But perhaps I could start with you, Emmanuel, or Chattis, and ask, based on your research, it was interesting to note the findings around the newcomer and the immigrant population and how that relates to supporting their entrepreneurial desires or interests. Was there any sort of best practices that you came across that suggested how to engage with that group or how to further connect with those individuals and interests?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly there are across Ontario different immigration supporting networks and communities that do work with the immigrant population. What we do find is that, and I mentioned this during the presentation, is that innovation is really a global approach to how can we do things differently? How can we improve what's available within our communities and within our economy? So certainly engaging with the new immigrant population and allowing them to contribute to our local economy. Give you some great examples. For example, there are services available to help newcomers and immigrants start up their own businesses. they may be interested in buying an existing business. Succession planning is a big concern across the country and across Ontario. And what better way than to pass the torch on and to engage newcomers through the acquisition of a business that the current and original owners are ready to pass the torch and engage newcomers. They're able to apply their skills and contribute to our local economies and communities. So definitely many best practice examples. And it's really a matter of connecting with the existing players and seeing what kind of programs can be put together to support those new immigrants. I mentioned during the presentation that Société économique de l'Ontario is launching recently a business incubator, a startup business incubator in Hamilton region. We'll be launching a similar program in the Toronto region fairly soon. And it's a matter of whether it be a solopreneur, someone that wants to become employed in that method, or taking on a small to medium or even a large business. There are many immigrants that do have money to invest into an existing business, and putting some sort of succession plan in place, transition plan that can help them ensure being successful with that operation will not only preserve jobs, but it will help that newcomer feel and be a part of the community, which is really what where Canada's strength is.
Fantastic. A question here from the audience. What role do you see for regional economic development organizations similar to Ontario East to support these CSFs you have identified?
Yeah, I think that the biggest opportunity is really connecting with the existing partners. Again, it's definitely a partnership-based approach at the regional or sector level would be critical. Ensuring that you can foster those relationships, see what the core strengths of each of those partnerships is, and sometimes it's a matter of one partner specializing in either one part of the economy or a certain population, and again, bringing those partners together and coming up with a community-based plan and a community-based approach that engages newcomers, engages immigrants, and all diverse. I think it's important to highlight that third one is the diverse populations that we do have in Canada. Diversity is our strength. How can we leverage that and be open to innovation so that we can ensure that our communities are as strong and resilient as possible.
Perfect. And sort of just the last question here before we move on to the next team. I'm quite interested and perhaps some folks in the audience as well in knowing, aside from some of the groups that you've mentioned, how do sort of non-traditional, maybe sort of siloed or outside of the economic development kind of environment into organizations can support? So I'm thinking things like the local library. How can they support some of the entrepreneurial sort of movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's, it definitely is. It's a larger community-based approach. It's a matter of getting everyone around the table, having some conversations. Everyone can work on their strengths, and identifying where those gaps are within the partnerships and the networks that exist. Every community is going to have their own unique challenges, and how can we identify those challenges within the community? It's by engaging with all stakeholders, with all existing partners, ensuring that we have some good connections with industry, and that industry is part of the solution. They want to be a part of the solution. They're the ones that are experiencing certain challenges, whether it be with their workforce or it could be affordable housing, but ensuring that programs are put together to support those diverse entrepreneurs and to be able to help immediately the local community. It's really going to be a matter of good, strong partnerships, but making sure that everyone's around the table. And there are so many different social organizations, community organizations that are there to help. In some ways, there's quite a bit of competition that takes place in between those organizations, but how can each bring their strengths to the table and help their local region?
Perfect. Well, thank you, Emmanuel and Chadas. If individuals want to connect with either of them or any of the finalists for that matter, we will be posting their contact information after the session. You'll probably find it either on a LinkedIn post or in some of the deliverables emerging from this conference. Up next, we have Lucas Chan, Farine Stanio Navarra, and Ellie Levin, who will be speaking on youth retention. If we can get the presentation loaded up.
Good morning, EDCO members and judges. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Ellie, and I'm joined by Farine and Lucas, my teammates, and we're excited to present to you our work on youth retention in rural communities. We'd like to start by sharing some of the insights from our work. First, and this may not be a surprise to many of you, there's a perception issue amongst youth about their career prospects in rural communities. Second, some youth simply will not be stopped from leaving. There's just certain personal and professional opportunities and experiences that rural communities cannot offer. Rural EDOs would be better off by supporting these desires and positioning their hometown as a great place to return to. Also, we've heard from one of our interviewees that childhood memories play a really important role in establishing an emotional connection with one's hometown, which becomes an important point when trying to attract youth that have left to come back at a later point in their life, and we'll touch on that later on in the presentation. Next, expats that are considering a return to their hometown because perhaps they do have that emotional connection have many considerations that go through their mind that extend beyond just simply the career transitions. There's things around housing, childcare, maybe healthcare or other amenities. And finally, we couldn't do this without acknowledging the impact of COVID-19. And here, the impact we've seen is through the work from home effect, where many newcomers actually that are don't necessarily have any connection to rural communities are just looking for opportunities to live in bigger homes and closer to the outdoors, are leaving the cities further away from their offices to settle into these communities. So definitely a great opportunity that we'll touch on later in the presentation as well. So we've converted these insights into three key what we call how might we questions, which were then later used to kind of derive our recommendations. So the three here we've got, first one is how might we demonstrate to youth grades 9 to 12 that their hometowns can support the career development. Two, how could we increase emotional engagement and connection for youth aged from grade 6 to 12 so that they do see their rural community as being their true home? And three, how might we communicate to community expats, again, individuals that previously lived in a rural community but have since left, that their hometowns can support both career and non-career transitions? So we've laid out kind of our three key objectives or recommendations, and then the corresponding tactics to each. And in the interest of time, I'll pass it on to Lucas, who will dive into our first strategy.
Our first strategy connects local businesses and nonprofits with youth while the youth are still in high school. The goal of this strategy is to build awareness amongst the students while they are still in school that there are opportunities for them to build interesting careers in their hometown. This connection with their hometown increases the chances that someone will either stay after graduation or move back after spending some time away from school and first job. EDOs can play an important role in connecting teachers and schools with local businesses. One of our recommendations is for EDCO to build a toolkit that helps EDOs understand how to approach local schools with opportunities to connect with the community. For example, EDOs familiar with the school system could approach schools with ideas for co-op placements, speakers, or community partners for specialist high school major events. As EDOs build relationships with schools, they would have more opportunities to share job creation programs such as Summer Company. Our other two recommendations are that EDOs can educate teachers and schools about what is available in the community to help them, and educate businesses on how to engage with and hire students for things such as co-op opportunities or participating in sector activities in schools. One of the biggest challenges teachers face when approaching the community is that they typically don't have time to network with members of the community and wind up relying on their personal contacts. EDOs can help teachers by augmenting the list of organizations and people that they have access to. In York Region, for example, the public and Catholic boards created a Google Sheet database of businesses who were interested to work with students for co-op, speaking, mentoring, hosting tours, SHSM or Specialist High School Major programs, and this Google Sheet was viewable by any teachers who had the URL. The view-only sheet contains relevant info for teachers, such as the business name, contact information, sector, and what the business or nonprofit is interested to do with students. The boards also created a Google form, intake form, to let businesses opt in and provide information specific to them, and there was no manual data entry in the process. And by the way, the boards own both the sheet and the form. Many business owners aren't aware of opportunities to hire, mentor, or speak to students. EDOs can help by building awareness of what schools are looking for in terms of help and how these are opportunities to help business owners. Next, EDOs can educate businesses on how to engage with schools, such as how to onboard a co-op student, including reporting and insurance requirements, opportunities related to the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program and Specialist High School Major Program, or hosting a visit. EDOs can also provide tactical supports to business owners who want to engage with schools and students, such as by providing draft job descriptions and co-op role profiles. By focusing on educating teachers about what is available in the community and educating the community about how to help and engage with schools, EDOs can play an integral role in connecting the ecosystem. In turn, more students will become aware of local opportunities, which will encourage more to stay after graduation or return after moving away for post-secondary education or early career jobs.
Hello, EDCO attendees. You have Fareen here to share our second strategy. How might we increase emotional engagement and connection for youth and their hometown? So some youth cannot be stopped from leaving after graduating high school or post-secondary. However, there is a lot of value in bringing youth back at later stages once they have accumulated their desire for new social and personal as well as professional experiences. One of our interviewees who left her hometown and returned at a later age felt a strong connection to her hometown due to the volunteer experiences she had as a child. Other initiatives we found prominent in strengthening a sense of home during youth development years include mentorship, youth sports, youth council, youth networking groups, and youth community feedback. In respect of time, I will share insight on two of the following tactics, but you can also reference the report. First, working with school boards to design a youth mentorship program that connects younger age youth with the older counterparts in the community could help strengthen community bonds, potentially carrying into adulthood as well. The relationship will cultivate trust building, skill development, and networking, which can make for a powerful experience in building relationships. It's important to build awareness of existing programs and for any new programs, ensuring that a matching criteria has been established, whether it is by age group or interest, for instance. Second, promoting youth sports will encourage emotional ties to the hometown. During an interview with a high school student, it was revealed that a motivator is his need for social interaction and building relationships while staying healthy. One approach is to launch a bike program which allows students to participate and explore all the streets of their hometown, including major landmarks and local hotspots. This helps build the memories while gaining a full sense of the entire location. A second approach is to partner with organizations who lead in sports in delivering a program. Thank you, and at this time I would like to lead into our third strategy delivered by Ellie.
Third strategy focuses on that transition back home. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, that includes both career and non-career elements. So we've developed a recommendation here as a two-step process. First is the development of an ambassador program. And what we mean by that is selecting individuals that have already gone through that transition of returning home from elsewhere and showcasing their success story. You know, we feel that the most effective way to reach the current sort of younger demographics today is through social media. And once that initial engagement can be established between an ambassador and individuals that are considering coming back home, or even new individuals that have never lived in the rural community, but are now with the onset of COVID-19, as we mentioned earlier, might be entertaining the idea. Once that engagement is established, then there's an opportunity to form social media groups where there can be a more organic way and a crowdsourced way of kind of collaborating and sharing information. So in terms of the details of this program, first step is to just acknowledge and recognize that communication channels have changed today. It's not enough to just put up resources and information on a website or a newsletter. You just have to go deeper. People have to be engaged where they spend a lot of their time, and have to engage in meaningful and personal ways that feel more relatable. So once that is acknowledged, you can start to identify local prospects that are motivated to support youth retention initiatives, have large networks of friends or people that from their rural community or other rural communities. And once that's established, you can start building a content plan that kind of addresses, what kind of questions might people have, what kind of worries, maybe you can talk about the local housing market and listings that are available and general prices. You could talk about local school curriculum and availability of healthcare services, for example. Next, really deciding on the details, which social media platforms to utilize, what media forms are going to be used, whether text or video or audio, engagement tools such as hashtags, frequency of dissemination, daily, monthly, weekly, and follow-ups required to capitalize on people's reactions, whether it's comments or likes, how to really draw them in. And finally, just deciding on key performance indicators to track progress and success of the program. Here we've shared an example of successful initiative by Chatham, where they were able to kind of establish a significant following of 18,500 members on Facebook, with quite a bit of activity here. 12 posts on the day that this was screenshotted, with over 500 posts in the last month. So, with that, I'd like to take it to Farine, who will conclude us here on our presentation.
This brings us to the end of our presentation. In the short few minutes, we have provided a high-level review on our study of youth retentions in small communities. Youth retention is critical for sustaining economic growth and vibrant life in rural communities, and we hope the following 3 key insights and recommendations support you in your youth retention efforts. In reviewing our 3 strategies, there is a perception of youth of limited career prospects, so demonstrate to youth that their career development can be supported by their hometown. Second, build greater emotional connections between youth and their hometown is essential as an anchor to pulling them back as they enter their adult life. And last, demonstrate to expats that both career and non-career concerns can be addressed in their return to home. On behalf of my team members, Lucas and Ellie, I would like to thank everyone here at the EDGO conference for your attention this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lucas, Farine, and Ellie. So we do have the questions, the Q&A open once again. I do know that there was a question asked regarding, do you see the lead being the EDO for the youth engagement, or would a BIA or a chamber? Perhaps I'd also add a community representative, or even a recreational officer from the municipality be a good fit. Lucas has answered that in the question in the Q&A. So if folks want to take a look at that answer, it's there. But I do have a question for the group here, and it pertains to universities and colleges offering online opportunities in much more of a broader range nowadays, due to COVID and the pandemic, and sort of opting out to a better online learning environment. Do you see a role from the EDO to engage with some of these post-secondaries to see if they could encourage some programming or encourage certain courses that could be distributed to some of the youth living in that community?
Yeah, hi guys, good morning. I'll take a kick at the responding to that. Yes, and it's kind of in line with the caveat that I would throw is kind of what I put in the chat as well, right? Every community is gonna be different. The role of the EDO relative to the chambers, the boards, BIAs, local incubators, small business enterprise centers, et cetera, the ecosystems that the previous group, shared, it's going to differ. So just kind of, I realize that in my kind of my broad brush answer. So that being said, I do think that engaging post-secondary institutions to offer programming relevant to local communities is very helpful. It can do a number of things. One is it keeps talent local, so in offering online programs that's relevant to a rural community. A post-secondary institution would enable students who might otherwise leave to stay home and do that course. The other thing that the post-secondary institution may consider doing is using local entrepreneurs, business owners, nonprofits to bring to life case studies. So if I think of something like skilled trades, a post-secondary college who's offering something around auto tech might be able to leverage somebody in the local community to be a case study to basically in that process promote local opportunities without hammering students over the head with it. So I do think there's definitely that opportunity that post-secondary institutions could be engaged in and help promote careers at home.
Perfect. And perhaps, and just based on time, maybe one more question here. How should communities address some of the negative views of youth in their community? This attendee requests, they like the idea of making sure youth are aware of potential jobs, but there may be some concerns with the perceptions of youth.
Yeah, and so I think all three of the strategies that were in the video, and I'd invite Ellie and Farine to chime in on this one. I think that all three strategies are getting at that. It's one thing like to go to youth and say, hey, our community is awesome. That's not going to work. I think demonstrating, and that's what we're trying to do, is highlight more experiential opportunities for students to see that there are vibrant opportunities, relevant opportunities in their communities. And one of the pieces of research was that, and thanks, Michelle, for calling this out. So students, by the time they reach kind of grades 6 to 8, they've begun to formulate their opinion of their community. So some of what we wanted to do, and the second strategy that we'd highlighted, really is trying to drive at building that affinity for the community before the kids get to kind of grade 8, so that whatever happens after, they've got a positive impression of the community versus there's nothing to do here. So I think there's definitely that, but then we get into high school and the conversation around co-op and bringing together the community of businesses and nonprofits into the schools via speakers and co-op, and all the opportunities that are highlighted in the report are intended to demonstrate to students that, hey, you know what, there are things here. And I think it was Farine that made the point in the video. They're going to leave. Some kids they're going to leave. They're going to go, and they're going to stay away. But if there are things that are done while they're still in elementary school, middle school, and high school. We do things that give the youth kind of a sense that, yeah, there's stuff here. If I want to come back, it's not a dead end. There are a lot of opportunities here. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. Is the overarching goal is to promote a positive impression and affinity between the youth and their community, as opposed to doing something kind of a one-shot campaign to combat negative perception.
Perfect.
Farine, Ellie, anything to add?
I think you touched it all on this one. I was just going to add something quickly on the first question that Jason asked. And, it's important to keep, for post-secondary institutions, important to keep in mind that they're very much, a lot of times they're driven by, the workforce, what's going on in the workforce and the job opportunities available. So I think when approaching a post-secondary, it's just important to identify exactly, just make the business case for why it's worth introducing a program to skill students in a certain sector, and show that there is an industry here that's seeking labor or people, and it's just the gap is really the skill training, and I think that will make it much easier to approach universities. But there may also be situations where those jobs don't yet exist, but you're just trying to create a new sector in your municipality. So maybe in those cases, it's more of a partnership where you want to tap into some of the teaching infrastructure that a post-secondary university has, but kind of have a more local context on how you envision your sector. So it could be sort of those two approaches to approaching the post-secondaries.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Lucas, Farine, and Ellie. If folks want to continue asking questions, feel free to use the Q&A. Some of the answers are under the Answer tab. There's an Open and Answer tab, and both Lucas, Ellie, and Farine will be answering some of those questions there as well. So I'd like us to go towards our last finalist, Ali Abbas, Amanda St. John, and Brendan Webb, and to have them take us through their new way of looking at performance measures. We can load up that presentation.
Good morning. In a perfect world, economic developers would know exactly how to measure their performance, exactly how to report their performance to their organization, and ultimately what performance measures are being used within the industry and how they can be compared across all industries. Myself, Brandon, along with my colleagues Aaliyah and Amanda, are here to talk to you about performance measurement in economic development. The question that we set out to answer throughout our research was, what are the new performance measurement metrics for economic developers? We took a look at what was done in the past, what is currently being done, and ultimately what can be done in the future, especially in the context of 2020 and 2021.
So to better understand performance measurement in theory and in practice, a combination of primary and secondary research was conducted. Secondary research included a best practice web and literature review to find practical approaches and new metrics to performance measurement. For primary research, we conducted online surveys, phone interviews, and had conversations with our colleagues at industry networking events. Through this, we were able to connect with EDOs from all across Ontario, representing municipalities of different sizes. Interestingly, more than 80% of EDOs we spoke to felt their current system of performance measurement fails to reflect the full scope of their work. So we wanted to understand why. It was critical for our team to uncover what's missing from current best practices, and the following 6 themes emerged. Next slide.
The first theme that we identified was that councils, boards, and management all have different expectations and all have different metrics in which they're looking to be reported on. Council, board, and management, though hoping to accomplish the same goals, ultimately might be looking for different indicators in which to analyze the success of economic developers and economic development organizations. The next theme that we found was that economic developers had trouble linking outputs to outcomes. Ultimately, outputs are the results of the actions taken by the economic developer and the economic development organization, and outputs are the impacts on the economy and the local population.
So our work is so much more than just the numbers, and this is something we heard time and time again during engagement. How do we measure the intangible? Initiatives like relationship building, partner development, and programs in support of innovation and collaboration are not easy to quantify, but are essential to our economic development work. The Government of British Columbia has created a performance measurement toolkit that seeks to provide a solution to this challenge. This toolkit includes a step-by-step guide and an interactive Excel worksheet to help you choose relevant indicators, communicate the impact of your work, and ensure your efforts are remaining focused on achieving SMART goals. So this toolkit's definitely worth taking a look at and was one of the most practical approaches to performance measurement that we found in our research. Next slide. Lack of budget and resources. So it will come as no surprise that most EDOs identified a lack of budget and resources for performance measurement. Only 6% of EDOs we spoke to have a budget, and of those EDOs, they represented larger municipalities or regions with populations of 100,000 or more. So in addition, many EDOs identified a lack of staff resourcing and time to dedicate to evaluating the impact of their work, especially for smaller municipalities or organizations. And during the pandemic, there often wasn't time outside of being responsive and supporting business needs to undertake performance measurement. Next slide.
The 5th theme we identified was that traditional economic indicators don't paint the full picture. On this slide, we provide the 10 traditional indicators used by economic developers to measure performance metrics. We combined building permits, commercial, and institutional into one box. These traditional indicators were reported by OMAFRA in their Measuring Up document for 2013. We learned from our interviews that indicators like GDP and unemployment don't provide an accurate representation of the overall and longer-term health of our communities. Quality of life indicators such as living wage, affordability, inclusion, economic diversification, and sustainable development activity are more reflective of the complete communities we are looking to build for our businesses and residents. Next slide, please. The sixth theme we identified was data gap in Canada. Economic developers rely on Statistic Canada to provide the most comprehensive, accurate, and cost-effective data. Unfortunately, there are delays in data collection and dissemination, and oftentimes local level data is only offered at a cost. As identified, EDOs have little to no budget to purchase information. In 2020, Statistic Canada made Canadian business counts data available at the local level for the first time to aid in economic recovery planning and reporting. This is an important first step and provides valuable benchmarking data for EDOs as we move through recovery and beyond. Next slide, please. Given the pandemic, it was crucial to answer the question of how does the community know when it's recovering from a pandemic or a disaster? Based on the findings on past outbreaks and the 2008 financial crisis, 7 indicators will assist EDOs in determining if they're recovering from the pandemic. The 7 indicators were government programs, so evaluating the success of the support provided by the government in response to the pandemic, such as digital Main Street projects, CERB, and etc. So you may want to develop a SWOT analysis of each program to determine the effectiveness of these programs in your community. Number 2, employment and unemployment. What industries or sectors were hiring during this time? What new opportunities have been created in the job market? Which areas saw the highest unemployment rates? For third, support for startups and entrepreneurship. After any major disaster, there is a spike in a new number of businesses that open up in a community due to job loss. How many new businesses opened during and after the disaster? How were entrepreneurs supported during this pandemic? The fourth is trade. How is the economy doing in terms of trade? With closures of borders and restriction on travel, we saw an increase in shop local initiatives. This has led to EDOs to examine supply chain management solutions for their current companies. Another recommendation is to monitor the Global Trade Index to see any changes in our domestic foreign versus trade. The fifth one was consumer habits. Changes in how consumers were purchasing products and services, such as curbside pickup, Uber Eats, and Skip the Dishes, were some of the changes that we saw. The sixth one is construction, development, and housing projects. With stay-at-home orders and the reduction of flow of traffic on major highways and neighborhoods led to construction development projects that were on the back burner to increase. The seventh one was support for local at-risk populations. Next slide, please. The 4 key takeaways we learned from our project was number 1, we need to invest and advocate at the federal and provincial level to create a database similar to our friends in the States with the RestoreYourEconomy.org. Number 2, borrowing metrics from other disciplines such as disaster emergency management. Number 3, we learned that larger municipalities have the budget and teams to address economic recovery initiatives versus rural communities. And fourth, further studies on performance metrics need to be conducted once we shift from the response to recovery coming May 2021. Next slide, please. As a conclusion, we learned there is a need to explore more on this topic to better utilize the digital tools and events for knowledge sharing and networking and economic development. Our team is working on developing a database that is created by economic developers for economic developers. This is why we still need your help. Feel free to contact us through our email or LinkedIn that's provided on this slide to learn more. Thank you and have a nice day.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Ali, Amanda, and Brandon. Just looking at time here, we'll probably have ability to answer 2-3 questions at most. One of the questions that we received from the audience was around the Ontario Performance Measurement Resource Guide that's available. A, was it reviewed during this project? And B, how does your sort of report differ from some of the findings there or from some of the elements of the guide?
Hi, yeah, so we did review that document. We also, one key gap that we were trying to look at was the disaster recovery component, and more so looking at businesses and how do you report back, because we saw that we're not able to properly story tell about how we're moving through this process of this pandemic. So we wanted to focus more so on the pandemic side, but also how do you kind of merged the disaster recovery with the economic development measurements. So we kind of merged both the metrics used by emergency management professionals looking at businesses in their communities and how they recover and how they can probably recover quicker. And then we kind of merged that with economic development metrics that we saw from that report. I hope that answered your question.
And just in terms of the toolkit that your team was sort of putting together, you mentioned that you're interested in sort of rolling that out or sharing that across the groups. So we'll be putting links to that activity through EDCO. But is there anything quickly that you could sort of provide as to, you know, a metric that someone can take away today and apply to their community?
Do you want to?
Sure, I can take a stab at this one. I think what we found primarily through our research was that there's no one size fits all approach to performance measurement. Municipalities really need to pull back and consider their why, what they're looking to measure. You know, what's the reason behind it? Are they looking to monitor the overall economy? Are they looking to measure the impact of an initiative? Is it in alignment with the strategy and achieving strategy targets? So depending on the reason for the performance measurement, it will really be customizable. And it's our hope that our toolkit will provide some suggestions and some recommendations to approach these different areas of analysis.
Perfect. Okay, well, I want to thank all three of you once more. We have moved to the end of our session, just coming up here on the 11:15 mark here. I do want to let folks know that each of the finalist reports you heard about today will be available up on EDCO's website under the Bright Ideas tab, and will be uploaded to the resource bank as well. I do want to sort of shift us to the judging phase of the competition now. Our competition is judged in a two-part process, which involves you, the audience, as well as a panel of past EDCO presidents. You'll see a poll shortly appear asking each of you to select your favorite finalist, and that will assist them in gaining points towards their final total score. So if we can launch that poll, that would be great. It will be about a minute long. In the interim, as the poll sort of completes itself, we are interested in sort of looking at rolling out the third annual version of the Bright Ideas competition. I should thank the Bright Ideas committee. Several members are here in the participants sort of tab for their contributions to coming up with topics, reviewing sort of timelines, and supporting this entire competition and its rollout over the course of the year. We will be looking at launching a new version or the third annual version of the competition sometime in the spring, and we'll sort of put those through our socials and information around that as well. So if we can conclude the poll, I can announce our winner as the favorite presentation for today. And the poll is, thank you. Okay, so according to the results, our audience has selected the youth retention team as the favorite presentation today. I don't think everyone can do it, but typically on Zoom, you can give a big round of virtual thumbs up. So I will give my thumbs up on behalf of all the participants. I want to sort of conclude and thank everyone again for being part of the Bright Ideas competition. It's been fun. It's been a great second year. Looking forward to the third year of the competition and looking forward to being in front of everyone next year as well.